Hello, my name is Luke Hodson, and we're going to be talking about testing and assessment today. We'll be talking about how to test kids in the general ed classroom as well as kids with special needs. Talk about different tools we can use for that, and basically just dive into it. So the first section I'd like to talk about is vocabulary and the concepts of this topic. And the first one is ATA. It's an acronym for Assistive Technology Act, which allows students with special needs to use assistive technology on tests or other assignments. So, for example, this might look like if a student's in your class and has difficulty seeing things, has some vision problems. It's just an example. I mean, he or she would probably already be sitting in the front of the class. They could see the board better. But if it's a little more extreme case, maybe the teacher provides that student with a magnifying glass, so when they get an assignment, they have that tool, that magnifying glass, to be able to, read what they're doing and not need additional, support on the test besides that. And that would work for some students with that issue. And obviously, there's a whole bunch of ranging issues with students with disabilities, and your assistive technology can get really creative, but that's just my example. And some other concepts and vocabulary words that I won't define right now, but we'll definitely get into later in this presentation are reliability, validity, bias, equity, and finally quantitative versus qualitative data. All right, so first one is reliability, and reliability is if you're reliable for something, you're responsible for it. As a teacher, you should always be reliable. And I'm just going to go over I'm just going to list some of the types of reliability on tests. There's test to retest reliability. There is parallel form reliability, inner reader reliability, internal consistency reliability. So internal consistency refers to the teacher. You're the one establishing the norms of test taking in the classroom. So and I think test retest reliability. I mean that's going to refer to if students if they know they can always take a test again, they're not necessarily going to prepare for it the first time. So just knowing that they know to prepare for a test is really important as a teacher. Remember when I was doing some teaching or observing, I guess, about a year ago, I noticed that a lot of the students wouldn't prepare for their tests because they knew that they could take the test as many times as they want until they got the grade they wanted before the school year was over. And just think that was a little bit of an issue to me. And that being said, we'll move on to our next topic, which is validity. So validity is basically, the definition for it. Sorry, I had it up here. Yeah, validity is just, whether something, is valid, I guess. So, the quality of being logically or factually sound, okay, is what a validity definition, Webster definition is. So, we have to construct that in our classrooms and make sure that it's, based off of the criteria. If it's criterion based, then it's valid. We got to make sure it's, a formative assessment. We got to make sure it fits the description for what it needs to be formative, and then testing it out. We need to test out our our findings and see if they are valid. And that's basically the types of validity that we see here in this chapter. Names for them, I wasn't extremely clear, were just as face validity, construct validity, criterion-related validity, formative validity, and sampling validity. So, all right, and finally, what a lot of these teachers probably want to know is how can I improve validity in my class? So, to make sure your goals and objectives are clear and defined, expectations of students should be written down. Write it on the board explicitly. That way, if they didn't hear you, they can just look up and see it. That simply, you don't got to repeat yourself. You just point to the board if they have a question. So match your assessment. Another thing you can do to improve validity in the class is match your assessment measure to your goals and objectives. So additionally, you have tests reviewed by faculty in other schools to obtain feedback. Just basically obtain feedback from an outside party who's less invested in the test that you made. So you send it to another person, another professional. They'll give their honest opinion about it, and it'll probably become a better assessment in the end. Students involved. Sorry. Another thing to improve validity in class is get students excited and involved. Have the students look over the assessment for troublesome wording and other difficulties. If they see this, they really feel like they know what they're going into when they're taking tests. They're prepared. They kind of know what it's going to look like a lot of times. Remember, as a student, I don't know if you remember when you were a student, but if you would go in your classroom and you might not know what a certain test would look like. Some teachers would let you know how many multiple choice there were, how many true and false. But I really felt like that helped. Just kind of knowing a little bit of what the format of the test would look like. So next we'll be talking about evaluating for disability. And this looks a little bit different in different states, but one thing that's pretty universal is that we need to get parental consent, and that's the first thing we need to do before we can really start anything. And after we get that consent, the students can be tested for levels of health, vision and hearing, social and emotional status, general intelligence, academic performance, communicative status, and motor abilities. So a lot of different tests, right? It's can obviously tell why you'd need consent for that, and yeah. Next is going to be we'll talk about bias and equity. So if there's a bias, that means essentially that there's an unfair favor given to a person or group or something in a given comparison. And equity refers to having some form of security and representing ownership of interest. So if you have equity in something, you have interest in it. You have something maybe invested or something like that. Usually refers to an investment in something. Then bias, what an example of that would be is like an IQ test, and I'll explain that a little bit. So, when a test is known to have a bias, that means the results are going to be skewed in one direction that benefits a particular group of people over another group. So, for an IQ test that's given in a suburban neighborhood, students are going to, for suburban kids, those kids are going to get better scores than maybe kids who live in the inner city, where you could make an inner city type of IQ test, and those kids in the inner city are going to score way higher than the kids in the suburban neighborhood are going to score. So it's essentially a bias is making a test that, is obviously going to skew in one direction for a certain group more than another. And so just being able to balance those things out is really important, especially for IQ tests. Finally, qualitative versus quantitative data. And I'm just going to talk about qualitative, and this refers to the quality or the beauty, magnitude, or nastiness of something. Requires more critical thinking and there can be more than one correct answer for qualitative data. Quantitative data refers to numbers and facts, so not a lot of gray area here. This is what most schools use for testing. There's always a right and wrong answer. All right, then finally, this last slide, I just have a little image here, just talking about the cycle of testing, starting with really wherever you want, measuring, analyzing, testing, optimize, and repeat. And it just goes back to measure, analyze, test, optimize, repeat. And that encompasses testing, and I hope this has been helpful.